One of my favorite mantras from one of my favorite humans in the world is Steve Jobs. He said, we're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why else even be here? And you think about this for innovators, that drumstick they hold saying, what can I do? How can I make an impact? I mean, think of songwriters. It's about evoking these deep feelings. Scientists, unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos. I have to believe athletes, it's not just winning a medal, but hearing that roar from the crowd. And entrepreneurs is solving pressing needs that improve everybody's lives. Well, today in Chatter That Matters, I have someone that just didn't have one drumstick in her hand. She pounded on both of them. Her name's Debbie Travis.
The following show is all real. It might shock you, and it could be your home.
Simply follow my basic rules and recipes, and you too will soon be creating great paint effects.
On the next show, we'll decorate a room, a basement, a 300-year-old kitchen, loft space.
You know, this cry that comes from the gut. His hands were shooting up. It was like a religious thing. Take me, take me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Debbie Travis.
She's a woman of so many talents and so many marks in the universe. Former fashion model, she captivated audiences with her beauty and style and grace. Then she transitioned into television and didn't just wander into it, became a household name, inviting viewers into her creative world.
I said, you know what I would do? And she turned round, she looked at me with such, I don't know whether it was fear or, and she ran out of the store.
Teaching them to beautify their living spaces with shows like Debbie Travis Painted House and Debbie Travis Facelift, long before there was specialty television. But Debbie didn't stop there. She penned books that guided readers through personal and home renovations, echoing her own philosophy that change is not about new paint, but about transforming lives.
It's the dream it, do it, live it. We all have dreams, of wanting to do stuff. The doing it is the work that you have to put in, and the living it is the consequences. Did you make a mistake? Are you, going to end up back at mum's kind of thing?
And now her villa in Tuscany, Debbie reshapes narratives, moving from reinventing personal environments to helping individuals reinvent their lives and awaken their potential. Join us as we delve into the life of Debbie Travis, a woman where every endeavor beats a new rhythm, inspiring all of us to find our own ways in making the universe dance. It's Tony Chapman. A big shout out to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. We hope to counter the negativity and growing sense of impossibility with stories of people who overcome circumstances to chase their dreams and change their world and ours for the better. Debbie Travis, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Oh, that's very kind, everything you said. But yes, hi, Tony.
So wonderful to be here. I'm a little starstruck because I did grow up I love color. One of my favorite people in the universe said to me one day, gray is not a color. And I couldn't agree more. So it's lovely to see it. So you're born in Lancashire, England. And when you sort of entered the world, I have to believe it was still an important cotton weaving town.
Well, it was. And actually my father, who died very young, like at 39, had a mill that he inherited that made sweet machines. So I was most popular girl in school because they made all the machines that made things like gummy bears and Colesfoot Rock and just all kinds of things. So we used to get all the samples, but it was I was born actually, brought up in Rochdale, which is a real mill town. But Lancashire is famous for its coal mines and its cotton mills.
So how difficult was it for you to let your parents, or maybe it was just your mother at the time, know that you wanted to go to art school? Because I have to believe in those days that's not a secure job. You're not going to make a living, or was that something they just celebrated?
Do you know what? It's so different from North America. And I've talked to a lot of, friends recently, actually, when I was writing this new book, because people don't discuss, in England, where you're going to go to university, not in my day anyway. And so I think it was just going from 15 to 16 when you could leave home. And my mum was widowed, and was raising 4 kids. And, it was basically, she said, well, you can leave home when you're 17. The day after my 17th birthday, I said, right, I'm off then. I'm moving to London. And she's actually turned to me, and I'll never forget this. She was at the stove where she kind of spent most of her time, and she said, do you want a jam sandwich for the bus? So, you listen to people whose parents, including myself with my own children, discussed your kids' future and where they were going to go to university and stuff. In my house, it was just not a discussion. So I literally got on a bus, 7 or 8 hours, went to London and moved in with a girlfriend, and that was it.
And, the interesting thing about it, with no email those days, no tracking devices, it just, you have to imagine how your mom felt. Either she was happy there was one less mouth to feed, and the last jam sandwich, or she just sort of said, let's trust the universe. And I think she's going to be okay.
I don't think she even thought about it. I think it was just, as you said, I was the eldest, one gone, one less mouth to feed. But yeah, and now I look back on those years of landing in London, with nothing, probably £5 in my pocket. And I would have had a fit if that was my kids.
It's an interesting thing to talk about, because do we overprotect our kids and try to always give them a safe landing? And do they learn that kind of resilience and this ability to continuously reinvent yourself that kind of marked your career? I wonder if you being the kind of mother that you're talking about, would you have done what you've done?
No. I think, first of all, it gave me, coming from the North gives you a great work ethic because everybody works there. It also gives you a great sense of humor, which I think is so important to get through the trials and tribulations of life. And, it comes with the territory that we had the highest rainfall in Europe where I come from. And, so it drizzled most of the time. So you get very good skin, but you have to have a good laugh to get through it all. And I think it was, jumping into the London world of the craziness and the wildness and living by your bootstraps, as we say, gave you a confidence that stays with you all your life.
And how did you become a model? I mean, this is a big jump. I mean, I can imagine you calling home to your mom and saying, they're paying me to take my picture. I can only imagine that first conversation going, what kind of picture?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to say they're paying me to take my clothes off. Luckily, nobody really wanted to see my body. But so basically, I was on a bus. And a guy said to me, can you imagine if this was your kids? We were going through the countryside and he said, can I take your picture? And I think I was 15 at the time and I was living at home. And I got off the bus and traipsed across a field, stood beside a tree. He took some pictures, told my mum that night. She hit me over the back of the head and that was it. But about a week later, it was in the newspaper about the youth today, and an agency called and asked me to join an agency. So by the time I got to London, I did have an agent. I immediately, within, I guess, about a year of doing what we call go-sees, going around London, getting a portfolio and stuff, got sent to Tokyo. Again, going back to my mother, it's like, I'm going to Japan, Mum. She was like, that's nice, dear. As if I was saying I'm going down to the village shop. and I went with other girls and I was there for 6 months and I came back and I bought an apartment for cash on the King's Road in Chelsea, where I'm sitting now. And my mum did come to London because she'd heard I bought, a flat, and she asked me if I was a prostitute. I said, no, I'm doing pictures. She said, all right, love, she had no clue, but that was the only way you made that money so quickly. But it made you tough, and we were all the same. I think we got a street smart and a gut instinct when you knew that something wasn't quite right. You go to a casting at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning with one guy in a dark room. It's like, right, run. So, this happened every day and you just became really good at it. And we were all, I think the equivalent of not having the social media and not having the contact list that you have today. We had each other. And we had this camaraderie of women. Did
London still have the swagger when you arrived? Because they must have been, with the British invasion, one of those moments in life where culturally London could say, we've arrived as a city.
Yeah, I love it. I love it I'm sitting here now. I arrived from Italy last night. And I remember when I first came at 16, 17, sitting on a red London bus, looking at this old lady with her shopping, thinking, you are the luckiest person ever. I've never got this city out of my blood. In my era, it was the punk era. So 2 minutes from where I'm sitting now is the King's Road. And that was where all the punk rock kids were, with the Mohicans and tourists would come just to look at them. The wine bars opened. So it was the invention of the wine bar. And of course, we would go to these wine bars, pick up men so we could get into the restaurants because we had no money. So you'd pick up a guy and then we always chose restaurants where we knew we had a window in the toilet to get out of. So you always see these girls leaving at dessert, going, I'm just going to the loo. And then, of course, you made your getaway, so you didn't have to do anything for the food. You know, we had it down pat, us girls. We absolutely loved it.
I did a lot of work in London in my early career, and my daughter lives there. And when I arrive in London, there's a smell to the city.
Yeah.
Even after they got rid of leaded gas, but there's a smell to London, Camden. You know, there's so many different parts of London, but there's just this energy, this love. Mid 80s, you meet your prince, and he meets his queen. So tell me about your time in Cannes, and then you meet Hans, and suddenly this person that loves London is going to be moving to Montreal, Quebec.
You know, as girls, we got sent with agents. So if you were in London, you got sent to different places. So I was in Amsterdam and I was on a shoot, really boring. It was like a catalogue shoot. There were like 10 girls and stacks of, racks of dresses and stuff. And I was sitting there and there was a really old woman. I never forgot it, with like bright red hair. She was about 25. I thought she was the coolest woman I'd ever seen. She, for me, she was old, and she was running around with a yellow clipboard, and she was like, you over there, you over here, up, and she was really bossy. And I said to somebody, who's that woman? What's her job? I want that job. They said, oh, she's a producer. I said, well, how do you become a producer? And they said, well, first of all, you hang around the pubs where producers go, and then you get your foot in the door. And that's exactly, I got back to London, went to Soho, where all the television people hung out. And within a few weeks, I had, a job in an edit suite and then on production. And I worked my way up to the BBC. And I absolutely loved it. I was still rock bottom. But I met somebody who I somehow managed to start my own television company. I never made a penny. I spent a lot of money, and I somehow, I don't know, I always had a way of making things happen. I somehow wangled my way to what's called MIP, which is 2 weeks before the famous Cannes Film Festival. And I didn't care really about the business side of it. What I cared about was the parties. I loved parties, still do. So I managed to wangle an invitation. God knows who I slept with. But anyway, I got an invitation to the Universal Studios party. And there I met this very nice Canadian, and married him 3 weeks later, like an idiot. And he'd gone to Montreal to go to university there many years before. And he said, oh, you'll love it, come out. And of course, that was it. I literally dropped everything. Within, weeks of being married, I was pregnant, and then I was pregnant again. So within 2 years, I had moved countries, got married, and had I had two babies, and I was shell shocked. You're
one of the most brutally honest people I've ever interviewed. So I want to ask you this question. Did you suddenly go, oh my God, I've become my mom and I'm going to be handing out jam sandwiches all my life and park my dreams? Or did you really think that you could do both?
No, I don't think I really thought about it like that. I was very, very happy. And, I had two kids, but I tried to get into, I didn't speak French. So I tried to get into TV, working behind the scenes. And of course, it was impossible in Montreal. And so I had a great friend in London who we were both signed up to do a paint finishing course in London. And I chose sex over painting. And I remember her saying to me, you're going where? You're moving where? What, with who? I said, oh my God, he's so amazing. And I'm going to follow him to this country called Canada. And she said, well, I've paid for our course. So I said, well, you do it. And if, I'll start painting and I'll ask you how to do it, which is what I did. So we bought an old Victorian house in a place called Westmount, which is in Montreal. And, I painted it with all these paint finishes on the phone to her going, well, how do you do faux marble? How do you do faux stone? How do you do sponging? And because I had babies, you start to meet other women. And then people started to say to me, could you do that in my house? I said, yeah, sure. So within a few years, I smelt like paint thinner, and obviously thought my children weren't going to grow up terribly bright. So I decided to make a video because people were beginning to ask me, how do you do this? It wasn't like just painting with a roller. It was like taking a feather, putting it, down a wall. And it was the beginning of the how-to movement. So I decided to make a video called Decorative Paint Finishes Made Easy. I sold it through gift shops across the whole of America and Canada. And we sold, in the end, over 1 million copies, 7 languages, different versions of it. And I started to get invited onto television shows and radio shows. And I remember the first one was a radio show somewhere, I think in Toronto. And I remember the interviewers saying, this sounds about as interesting as watching paint dry. And suddenly all the lights, it was live, were going on and people were going, I need to speak to Debbie. I'm up a ladder and I don't know how to do, and it went ballistic. And then I got invited on chat shows, but I don't know if you remember the Deanie Petty show. So I remember being on her show and Tom Hanks was in the green room. The producer coming in and saying, look, we're really sorry, Mr. Hanks, but we need to cut your segment short because Debbie's here. And he was like, why? And I said, well, I'm showing people how to rip off wallpaper. And he was like, oh, Rita would love to know how to do that, And so it just became huge. And then the producers and the networks were changing, as all media does every 10 years, and the cables were starting. And the cables were coming out with rubbish because they had no money. So it was old shows, old dramas and stuff. A few months later, we were back in Cannes for my husband's work. And this producer came up to us and said, look, our network's going to tank. It's only been going a year. Would you do a show about painting? And so I came up with an idea called The Painted House.
Hi, I'm Debbie Travis, and welcome to The Painted House, the decorating show that's not just for the grown-ups.
We rented a brand new house. We painted. We got a show, an episode out of the toilet, out of the the laundry room, out of the nobody done this. Nobody in North America, and then the show aired. This is the first episode of the first season of The Painted House, and it aired to the worst audience you could possibly imagine because it was the day that O.J. Simpson got his sentencing.
Mrs. Robertson.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
So even I didn't watch my show. The whole world was watching OJ. And anyway, so it was a disaster. I think 3 people watched. But the week after that, it went to 200, 20,000, 100,000, 150,000, 3,000, 1 million viewers. And they'd never seen this with cable. These were network numbers. Back to Cannes, where it was sold to about 80 countries. So our budget went up and up and up. And within kind of 2 or 3 years, we started traveling.
Now, just hold on here. So you're going to these different countries. I mean, you could have shown them different styles in Montreal. A little bit of sense of, well, we're going to go to Italy because there's a certain thing I want to show you. That was good.
Well, it was hilarious because we turned their living room into a reggae style. We got great, and people said, how'd you get such good footage of people sobbing and crying? I said, well, look at the room, Now the other shows were starting and they were all so straight. And I wasn't really a decorator. I was a television person and this is how you put blue with yellow. And this is how I didn't care 2 hoots about that. All I cared about was this amazing reaction as somebody was sobbing in the corner. and because it was television and I understood television. Television is about entertainment. And that's what we were doing. We were entertaining people, having fun, as they say.
So how did it feel? I mean, Deanie Petty was obviously well known in Canada, but I mean, there was this, I'm trying to remember if people would remember this name, Oprah.
So we're trying today to solve some of your decorating dilemmas with top experts from around the country. The woman behind that breathtaking room makeover is this woman. Her name is Debbie Travis. Debbie.
That's like getting knighted.
The day Oprah calls is a day you never, ever forget. I was actually in a store with my very badly behaved young teenage boys. The producer at Oprah had got my cell phone number from, it must be in the first phones, from the office. And she called and I was in this store which had very like music and I said, oh my God, the Oprah Winfrey Show. So the girl behind the desk turned down the music. Everybody in the shop was listening to my end of the conversation. And she was basically saying, can you be here Monday morning? So I went, but they don't actually tell you you're going to be on the show sitting next to her. So I got into Chicago to Harpo Studios, and they took all my footage, and then I had to go into a booth and do voiceovers. And Oprah was in the next booth. And I remember thinking, this is the happiest moment of my life, even though there was a wall between us, never thinking it would go any further. They don't tell you because they're watching to see if they can think that you can hold up, sitting next to her. So the next morning at 7:30, the day of the live show, they said, you have the yellow chairs. And they called it Home Base. And I thought they meant Home Depot. And I said, yeah, we have Home Depot in Canada too. No, Debbie, Home Base, you're sitting. And at first, I'm not a very nervous person, but I sat next to her and at one point she put her hand on my knee and she said, you need to stop shaking. I was like, oh my God. And she was so real. And Amazon, I think, had really just started. And I had my first 3 books were decorating books, and you watch them and they went to number 3, number 6, number 8 on Amazon. I mean, like unheard of today. And then, I did it regularly for quite a while. And it got to the point where, because they don't pay for you to get there. They don't pay for anything. And so it was getting very costly. And then, of course, your publisher wants to come and your whole team is coming. And it was very exciting.
All of this is happening. Is any of this planned? Is this sort of, okay, in the next 18 months, I want to do X, Y, Z? Or is it just, I'm going to write this book? Or like, are you just catching this wave because you're such a magnetic personality? Or are you, in fact, purposely setting the wave?
No, never, ever set a plan. Even I'm a little attention deficit. I think I'm very much on the cusp. So I have a huge amount of energy. I exhaust people because I'm always like moving. And one thing I do jump on is opportunity. And that's what I talk to young people about a lot, because some people, you can slam them over the head with somebody gives them some kind of opportunity. Me, I like jumping into things, and I am all over the map. I do know when I'm bored and when I'm tired. And that was a big thing for me in television. It sounds crazy to say it was easy, but it was easy because we were the front runner. People were coming up behind us and the networks were saying more decorating shows. Let's give everybody a decorating show. Whatever you want, get somebody else. We need other people, but we were always pushing the boundaries. And it was a wonderful way to do television. It was the cowboy years. And, we ended up being a production company producing other people's shows. So many of the lifestyle shows from cooking, property, were ours. It was just this constant wave. And then things started to change in the industry. So the bigger I got, when I ended up on national networks, more people got involved. There was more money involved. So now you're sitting in a boardroom with 40 people and they'll take an idea. And by the time they've all put their opinion in, you've got what I call brown. You've got nothing. You've got dullness. And I'm a great believer, pick an audience and go with it. If you start saying to people, well, those people don't like that, and that you can never please everybody. You have to pick an audience.
At the same time, you're also launching a whole platform. You're going to get into products. You're obviously authoring books. You're doing personal appearances. How did you manage to keep that all together? Knowing that, where you excel is when you're putting something out that you say, I love that kind of television. I love pleasing that audience. How did you manage to do it all?
The good thing about being based in Montreal, all our business was in New York, LA, and Toronto. So we had a great Victorian house right opposite the school. Literally, we heard the bell in the morning and I walked the children across the road. Our offices and our studio was 2 blocks away. We were home to do the homework. We were home to be with the family. And when we traveled for work, filming, which we did a lot, we did it in the school holiday. So my children learned at 8, 9 years old to be cable carriers, to behave, go and play outside, and be quiet around the set. And they were used to it. One thing they laugh about today is the house that we had in Montreal, we used as a set. And so my eldest son, probably about 13 at the time, and wrote to a national newspaper about his fear of camp, because in the summer they went for 2 or 3 weeks to a boys' camp. And like a lot of Canadian children. But he wrote not the fear of being away from mummy, but the fear of coming home and what I'd done to his room, because mummy, I don't want a ballet room, you know. I don't want a cowboy themed room anymore, you know. Oh, don't worry, I'll paint it out, you know. So we used the house as a set. So they would be, anyway, this newspaper picked it up. How I hate my mother. So we got our balance by making the work environment, conducive with the children. And then the product line started. And so that was when I really started spending a lot of time flying in and out. It was fantastic. So we started with paint. Within weeks, we had everything from flooring to taps to, I couldn't do any wrong. And it exploded. And it was a wonderful, wonderful 10 years of, and funny when Brits came over to, because they don't have anything like that in England, really at that extent, like this massive hardware store. So when Brits used to come over, we used to tour Canadian tires, you know, and say, no, come and look in the home section. That's me. No, I want to buy a hockey stick. I want to buy all this. So my job there was to bring women into the store, because before that, women weren't, they'd go in the shop, but they weren't spending time buying plates and curtains and stuff like that. So I had to make that attractive. So we put our own team together to make that happen. And it was very successful.
When we return, Debbie talks about her adventures of putting pen to paper. From decorating to the chaos of a working mom raising kids, her love of writing books, her life in Tuscany, and of course, my 3 takeaways. Hi, it's Tony Chapman, host of Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. RBC provides small business owners with resources that go beyond banking. Resources that help them attract new customers, build strong employee teams, and manage their money. To get access to these services, go to rbc.com/beyondbanking. Small businesses matter to RBC.
A walk at the same time every day. Everybody goes out. So you'll get teenagers hanging out with their friends. You'll get, you know, a Nona and her grandchildren. You'll get 2 best friends gossiping. And it's just, they walk around the block, or they walk on a highway. The entire country gets together, and it actually has its own name, the Passeggiata. So I'm thinking, well, you can bring that back into your life. All we want now is touch. We want to see smiles, you know, and it'll take time, but we need to learn to reach out.
Today, my special guest is Debbie Travis. She's an extraordinary entrepreneur, broadcaster, media personality, author, speaker, and so much more. As you're constantly moving and putting new dance, is this partially out of boredom that you've kind of done it and you want to do something else? Writing, for example. Is that therapeutic to you? Is that you're doing it for monetary, or you just feel it's part of the platform?
Nobody writes a book for money, but put it that way. And they call most books, unless you're a huge international bestseller, but most books, I think, are ego projects, not in a bad way. I think everybody's got a book in them. And I often say to people who are having a bad time, write it down. If you're having, you want to tell the story of your family, write it down. It's a wonderful kind of homework. It's a wonderful practice. So the first 8 books were with Random House in New York, and they were 8 decorating books, and they came about because of the success of the shows. So and then I got asked by the National Post to be included in a group of well-known women on how to get through the years of working and raising children. And it was geared to women who were going back into the workforce, women who were already in the workforce and struggling. So the other well-known women wrote really quite heavy things. And I just wrote a very funny story about the chaos of raising kids. And then my publisher called and said, I think this should be a book. So I wrote a book called Not Guilty about the chaos of raising my children. And they're still suing me. But, your kids don't remember stuff. They'll say things like, Mum, we never went on holiday. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've got the receipts, you know, kids.
Oh, I know.
So that book was a real turn for me. And then when I made the leap from the television world to renovating this property in Tuscany, which was 5 years of craziness. And then I started to get, it was called Design Your Next Chapter, the book. And I started to get attracted to people. Maybe they were a surgeon and they'd had enough and they wanted to sing. Or they worked for the bank for 20 years and all they ever wanted to do was be a baker. And you start getting attracted to these stories. So I wrote a book about other people's stories, my stories, and how to do it. And this was a big bestseller, a very emotional book for a lot of people because it's the dream it, do it, live it. We all have dreams, of wanting to do stuff. The doing it is the work that you have to put in. And the living it is the consequences. Did you make a mistake? Are you, going to end up back at mum's kind of thing? And so that book then morphed into the next book and now the one I've just done. So
I want to end with talking about your book because it's fabulous, but Tuscany comes along.
I think happiness is being in the right place at the right time and being where you should be at that time. In any business, you kind of crave something fresh to reignite your passion again.
And to me, this is as big of a change as this London girl moving to Montreal. You're now decided that Tuscany is going to be your base. How did that all come about? And you've really sort of almost taken these books that you've written more recently and said, this is about personal transformation, isn't it?
For me and for others. So we fell in love with Italy while we were filming. I mean, like, everything, the food, the people, the way of life, we fell in love with it. And so we had a little dream. One day if we could afford it, we'd buy a house for us. And then, of course, you start looking at, 14 bedroom convents and I said, I'm not buying a ruin. I don't speak Italian. I can't do it. We bought a ruin on a hillside in Tuscany. I was finishing a show, which was called All for One, for CBC. And it was a big national Wednesday night, enormous show traveling the country. And it was breaking me. I was at the end of my tether. The teams there were so big. We had a crew of 69 crossing the country. I think the fun had gone out of it. And I really felt if I'm not excited, we had producers from LA. It was enormous. At the same time, I was on this journey in my head in Italy. I did a speech in Vancouver and I had maybe 1,000 women in the audience. And at the end of the speech, there was an interviewer who said, what's next for Debbie Travis? And I said, I am going to be taking women to my villa in Tuscany where we'll do yoga in the lavender field. We'll walk through the olive groves. And I went on and on for about 5 minutes. And I realized everybody had gone completely quiet. Nobody coughed. You could hear a pin drop. So, oh my God, I really thought, because the lights are on you, so you can't really see the audience so much. I thought people have walked out. So the big lights came on and it was like people in shock. And suddenly all these arms went up in the air and it was like, take me. And the next day I got husbands saying, take her. And I didn't have a villa in Tuscany. We hadn't found the right place. So I knew I was onto something. So I went to the area I liked. I rented an old dusty villa, cleaned it up, brought the first 18 women over, and I could have put them in a tent. It was the most mesmerizing, the magic of putting 18 women together who didn't know each other. And within a year, we found the property that we have now. And I spent 5 years doing it up. While we used this rundown place, we did only one a year because I was still filming. And then in 2015, everybody moved, into our place. Changed my life. It has changed thousands of women's lives and men now.
Talk to me about your book, Joy, Life Lessons from a Tuscan Village, because once again, you've taken a physical space and brought the heart out. And you brought the heart out through these gorgeous designs and beautiful pictures and these stories. So
it's a beautiful book, full of photography and really lovely. When we start, so we've been doing the retreats now for really 10 years. You watch people from the day they arrive to the day they leave. And within 48 hours, they start to change. Their skin looks better. They're eating pasta every day. Oh, I don't eat pasta. They're eating pasta every day. They're drinking olive oil. They're drinking copious amounts of Tuscan wine. They're talking, like my husband's often saying, what are they talking about. Women, they start the yoga class in the morning. They talk all the way through downward dog. They talk all the way through breakfast. And these are women who don't know each other, of all ages, all countries. And they leave with 17 new best friends. And at the end, we do what we call a forum. And we started to have a lot of people very nervous and very upset. And they were saying, I'm frightened of going back. You know, I live in a condo. You know, how do I bottle this? I started to break it down. What is it about? Because really Tuscany, it's not that it's any different from anywhere else. It's a time warp. So we're living like our grandparents lived, you know, chatting over the back fence, camaraderie of each other, helping each other, eating in season. You know, my grandparents ate potatoes and carrots and parsnips in the winter. You're eating better. And it's all that community. So these are the lessons from a Tuscan villa. So you can take that home to wherever you live in the world and try and make those changes. So that's what Joy was all about.
Your latest book, Laugh More Stories from an Unexpected Life. It is so beautiful. Each one of these, there's so many things that can be framed in it, so many unexpected twists in life. And again, this laughter, this humor, the stuff that you talk about. Tell me about what inspired you to do this book and what do you hope people take away from it?
Well, there's a famous saying in Italy called, let me try and get it right. Mangia bene, eat well, ridi spesso, laugh more, amore something, love more, love much. And I love that, laugh more, ridi spesso, just laugh more. When you tell a story to a friend, you've had a bad day. Like this morning in the hotel, I got a poached egg, right? I cut into the poached egg. I've got one pair of white pants. The egg went all over me, all over the man sitting in white pants next to me, all over the tablecloth. Now, some people could go to their room and just have a good sob. You just have to laugh, you know? Now, when you share these stories with a friend, there's a level of trust. There's an uplifting feeling, the endorphins going through it, because you're turning a situation into something funny. We do it with our children. You know, kids can be hell, but you tell your friend, oh my God, I'm going to throw that baby through the window. You know, it's never stopped crying all day. You know, you're not going to throw it through the window, but just by sharing your frustration with another like-minded woman, it helps you. And so Laugh More is loads of stories. I love being a storyteller. My mum was a storyteller. My grandma was a storyteller. And it's the humor. And so it's not really a typical memoir. It's stories of a year in Tuscany. The wild characters we have here.
Well, that's what I meant by memoir. I didn't mean it like this is my memoir, but the 4 seasons and the way you transform, it's almost like you're asking people to take a piece of something from almost everything.
Yeah, I want people to laugh out loud. I want them to think of their memories. It's like me being back in London today. There was a supermarket at the end of this street. And a few years ago, 40 years ago, I was in the supermarket. An old lady, it was July, it was very hot. And a woman in a big thick coat and a toque, like a woolly hat. Anyway, she passes out on the floor. So over the tannoy, they're saying, is there a doctor in the house? And everybody's standing around. And, this doctor leans over and the woman's about 80. And he says, this is really strange. She's got hypothermia. Now it was, 80 degrees outside. So it's very strange. And, everybody stepped back. And anyway, they took off her coat and then they took off her hat. She passed out and she had a frozen chicken under her hat. Yes, it was a terrible thing. She probably got 3 months in jail, but I never forgot that story. And so while I was writing a year, the 4 seasons in Tuscany, it would throw me into these incidents of different periods of my life. And I was roaring with laughter writing this stuff. So I just hope that people have a good laugh. And then we illustrated them all. So instead of photos, this Australian girl I know, who's an amazing illustrator, did these really funny illustrations, which I think are beautiful. So I just want people, these are very hard times. They're very heavy times. And this is just a book to put in a stocking for Christmas or to curl up by a fire and have a cup of tea and laugh more. Have a good laugh, a chuckle, a giggle.
Dream, do it, and living it. If they were talking about you 100 years from now, what would you hope they'd say on all three of those?
Yeah, dreaming, we all dream. It's ideas, but I think I did it. I worked really hard and I look back on stuff, even looking back on the pictures of the renovation. I think because I show the women when we have groups there, I show them what this place looked like. It was pigs running around. It was awful. And how I did it, I really don't know. And how I afforded it. But, so I think it's just this determination and willpower. And yeah, you can have a good sob and cry yourself to sleep at night, but you wake up in the morning, you pull your socks up and out you go again. And I think that I'm very proud of. And that's my roots. That's my tough northern roots.
As your kids are growing up and not worried so much now that they're going to have a ballerina room, what do they think of their mom?
Well, I'm very, very proud of my sons. I think they're proud. They're not going to tell me. I think they're proud. They're poor kids. I used to go in to get Canadian Tire to get toilet rolls like everybody else. And there'd be a cutout Debbie Travis. And I'd go, oh, go and stand by that. Let's take a picture. And they're like, Mum, I hate you. Stop it. And so they're used to it. They're used to it. But, and then of course they've done stuff on their own. They've never used my name for it. And then of course they hate it. They're both married now, but when they were dating and then somebody would say, are you Debbie Travis's son? Oh, okay. And they you've ruined it. You ruined my life. I don't know if they're proud of me or not. I'm just an annoying mum.
So I always end with my 3 takeaways. And before I begin, you're the most honest person I've ever interviewed.
Oh,
things that come out of your mouth like, I must have slept my way to get to that party and stuff. It's just, but it's so refreshing for people to stop putting on this false front and just be who you are. But I think the first one that I loved was when you said, at TV, I knew it was about entertainment. It wasn't about being serious. It was to entertain your audience, know your audience and entertain them. And that's such a great lesson for people that we try to somehow live through what we think others want versus what we know inside. Second thing, which is such a universal lesson, but one that you've done time and time again, is jump into opportunity. I talk to kids nowadays. They're so overpowered by negativity and this growing sense of impossibility. I'm going, there's opportunity everywhere. Just look for it. Jump in. Even if you fail, at least you're trying. You're going to be so excited to be on it. But the most important thing I got from you is how much belonging has mattered to you through your entire life. When you were there with your modeling friends and said, we belong together. We took care of each other. When you talk about the times in life when you're speaking to a room full of women and they're all putting up their hands, and I could just see the sense of community with you. And now when you're saying in Tuscany, when people come and even when they leave, you want them to take a sense of that back, that they're still part of this wonderful universe. So for all of that and more, and for making me laugh for the last 45 minutes, Debbie Travis, you've just been a wonderful person to chat with.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.